Scotland Yard has on 3 occasions refused even to investigate this matter. Now, if I was accused of rape, I think the police would be at my front door in 15 minutes, and rightfully so. Why haven't they bothered with him?
Now, stripped of his prince title, kicked out of his royal lodge in Windsor, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is now reliant on his older brother, the King, to fund a new home for him at Sandringham. But his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, will have to fend for herself. Buckingham Palace's sensational statement last night made clear that they viewed the censures as essential after Andrew's friendship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And the King and Queen's thoughts remain with the victims and survivors of all forms of abuse. They were very keen to stress that. Is it enough for the victims of Epstein? The late Virginia Roberts Giuffre alleged that she had had sex with the former prince 3 times after being trafficked by Epstein as a teenager. Andrew denies any wrongdoing, but of course has been followed by his close association with Epstein. Earlier, speaking to Aisha Hazarika here on Times Radio, Virginia's brother Sky Roberts and his wife Amanda gave their reaction to the latest developments and spelled out why this shouldn't be the end of the matter.
I don't think they can hide in the shadows anymore. I think there has been so much pressure put by the survivors. So many things have come forward, documentation, emails, the birthday book being released. I mean, those were people that were clearly in his inner circle. And in that book, it's so clearly obvious that these people were aware. If they had not participated, they were aware. And so it's time. Everyone who has been affiliated deserves to have to answer these questions that survivors have been pushing for so long. And it is not their burden to carry. It is our government, the Department of Justice right now is sitting on this information, and how shameful our administration has been acting and calling it a hoax. And again, like, we commend the UK because we've seen them at least put light on people, shame them for their associations for Jeffrey Epstein. And we need to see the same action here, and we need to go further.
And what would your message be to Andrew? If you could make a direct appeal to him, what would your message be?
I think it's time to come forward. I think it's time to reveal everything that you knew. It's clear that you had very close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, even when you said that you didn't. And our sister deserves that truth. Our sister deserves that truth. And if you are a person of character, think of your own daughters. Think of the ages that they were when you met Virginia Giuffre. What would you want for your own daughters? Would it matter if the abusers of your children were entitled or in power? Absolutely not. You wouldn't care what side of the aisle they stand on, how much money they have. You would want their perpetrators to come forward. And that is what we're asking.
Well, that strong message from Amanda Roberts, who is the sister-in-law of Virginia Giuffre. Ben Taylor is editor of the Sunday Times. Plenty to cover, of course, for this weekend's edition. Where do you think the story goes now then, Ben?
Well, I think it's going to go in a number of directions, to be honest with you, Carolyn. I think that was very moving, that clip that you played back there. And I think that's an aspect of the story that people are very interested in, which is the legacy of Virginia, but also what happens next in America. Because I know listeners to Times Radio will know this, but be no mistake, there is a big political movement there. It's, some parts of MAGA, many Democrats who want files opened, investigations restarted, and an element of justice meted out to those who were involved with the late Epstein. And I think that is an area we're going to be looking at in the Sunday Times this weekend. But I also think there are huge constitutional and arguably political ramifications of what the palace said last night, because although they're getting some PR plaudits today for finally gripping, as one says, the issue and putting out a statement that went a good deal further than the statement from a fortnight ago. One does start to wonder what this now means for the future, because I look at the questions that are coming into the website, the comments that I'm sure you're getting on Times Radio today, and the questions that we're discussing in our own newsroom, and these refer to all sorts of things. They refer to money, mainly. Where does the royal family's income come from? Why is it that they've got so many properties? Why aren't they open to the public? Why don't we know how much tax Prince William pays? Why are they so secretive about some of the aspects of the duchies in Cornwall and Lancaster? Why don't we know the contents of the Queen's will? Why don't we know the contents of the late Prince Philip's will? And then you get into other issues. Is you talk about Beatrice and Eugenie? Should they keep their titles? You talk about what we're going to do with what is the future for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, given that they are no longer working royals? Should they keep their titles? And it sounds like
there's like a thread that's been pulled, and it's just unravelling.
And I was talking to a constitution historian earlier, and we were discussing 1992, which you and I will remember as journalists, which was quite an astonishing year.
The annus horribilis, yeah.
Exactly. And what happened, many listeners will remember this, of course, but it was a seismic year in terms of politics, because although John Major sneaked home in the election within 3 or 4 months, he had to face down Black Wednesday, and interest rates went through the roof. And we came out as listeners will recall the exchange rate mechanism, and it meant that life was very difficult for a lot of people. We basically had a huge cost of living crisis, which meant that people were being thrown out of their homes, almost literally, by building societies and banks. Couldn't afford to repay their mortgages. Very tough times, brutal times for many people. And at the same time, we had the Windsor fire, and it emerged that the state was going to have to pick up the tab to repair Windsor, and there was a populist revolt, dare I say, and people said, no, this is not acceptable. These are wealthy people, and the Queen agreed to pay tax, and then that was the first time. That was for me that was a similar moment when there was a chink in how the monarchy was perceived by the modern day body politic, and I think when I look at the questions that are coming into TV, radio, and the web, and I look at the reaction of audiences, I feel there's a similar moment now where people are questioning in a way that they may not have done for some time.
Well, Ben, thank you for that. Nigel Cawthorne is author of Prince Andrew, Epstein and the Palace. Nigel Cawthorne, do you feel that this could be the same sort of moment, a tipping point moment, if you like, in terms of the attitude of the public towards the monarchy?
Well, perhaps. But we're kind of dancing around the edge of the question here, that his titles, they may mean something to him, but I've been a mister all my life, and it's okay. And the artist formerly known as Prince managed too. And whether he lives in Windsor or in Sandringham, well, Sandringham's not exactly Siberia, is it? I'm sure there's a golf course up there that he could be playing at. What's not been addressed is the nub of this whole thing. Virginia Giuffre accused Prince Andrew, the former Prince Andrew, of rape in a federal court in the United States, in a suit that he settled for £12 million, reportedly. However,
and he denies that there was any wrongdoing on his part.
Indeed, and if he's entitled to anything, he's entitled to the presumption of innocence, certainly. However, Scotland Yard has on 3 occasions refused even to investigate this matter. Now, if I was accused of rape, I think the police would be at my front door in 15 minutes, and rightfully so. Why haven't they bothered with him? If he's just a plain mister now, maybe they will.
Well, you may have heard Virginia Giuffre's sister-in-law, Amanda Roberts, saying something along the same lines, that Andrew needs to be investigated now by the police. You know, he may be cleared, but only 2 people have been prosecuted so far in what is a high-level worldwide sex trafficking ring. And it must be bigger than just those 2 people. So at the very least, would Andrew feel that he could help with that investigation? Has he got information that he could pass on to those investigators to try to get some justice for the victims of Epstein?
Well, indeed, the US Department of Justice has twice requested interviews with him under the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty. Under that treaty, if Andrew doesn't answer directly to the FBI, then the Home Office is supposed to send the Metropolitan Police round to question him. And if he doesn't cooperate, then he's supposed to be asked the FBI's questions in an open court. That is what the treaty with our closest ally says, and we're in breach of that treaty. He's offered occasionally to speak to the FBI. Well, the FBI have an office in the new American Embassy in Nine Elms. He can drive down there any time. It's not very far from Windsor. It's even quite a short drive from Sandringham to get there. So he can do that. It's about time.
Let me just bring Ben Taylor back in, editor of the Sunday Times. It was so interesting, wasn't it, that when the Times put in a Freedom of Information request asking about the finances behind Royal Lodge, where Andrew was still living and intended to live for a while, that the information was forthcoming, which is quite unusual for an FOI, isn't it? Sometimes it takes a long time. Yeah. And that sort of started the ball rolling again on these questions about the finances and what they pay to live in their palaces.
That's entirely right, and I don't I haven't discussed what went on there with my colleagues at the Times, but it feels to me that there was an element of political pressure. Not political from Westminster, but just a sort of internal politics, which meant that information was finally released, even though it's been sought by journalists for many years. I mean, a year ago, next week, the Sunday Times, in conjunction with Channel 4, published an investigation, as I alluded to earlier, into the Duchess, and we came across the leases for all the properties that they own and the land that they own are up and down the country, which had never been seen before, and they were quite extraordinary. And they showed that schools, parts of the NHS, prisons, etc., were all paying money to the royal family, just who by the way did nothing. They just happened to own the title deed. They didn't offer any services. They didn't maintain the buildings. They just happened to own them. It was feudal. It was literally feudal. But that information had been sought for years, and it was only thanks to the investigative work of the journalists that we came across it. So to go back to your point, I think that the problem that the royal family have is that once you start asking one question, many others then follow, and I think that Prince William in particular has got a real problem here. We know from reporting over the last 2 weeks, has been very keen to divest himself of his uncle and and punish the former Duke. However, it's going to be his show at some point, and he's going to have to think long and hard about how much light he wants to let in to the monarchy. By the way, the points that were made just earlier about America, I think, are really interesting, but I don't sense that there's and I stand corrected on this. I stand to be corrected on this. What I don't sense at the moment is that there's a huge push by the US justice system for something to happen. Now, if you're conspiratorially minded, I think we all know why that is, because there are a number of high-profile individuals in America who want this all to go away.
Well, of course, and the victims would like some of the high-profile individuals who haven't been named yet to equally be brought to the fore and face some sort of justice or at least investigation. Just final one back to you, Nigel Cawthorne. The mention there of William, we're told it seems that he played a big role in the ousting of his uncle. What do you think happens then further down the track when he eventually takes over as king?
Well, there's some way to go before that. I mean, we have a crisis that's kind of running out of control right now, and I know Charles has been suffering from cancer, but he seems to be on his feet. He can go and visit the Pope, so we have some time to go before that. But I don't know why we should be waiting for the Americans to do something about this. I mean, the one thing that Andrew hasn't been stripped of so far is his British citizenship.
Mm. Well, the one point I would make is that it's very awkward, this scandal for the Metropolitan Police. It may go some way to explain the reluctance, because bluntly, he's had police protection for a long time. Those people are witnesses, and we attempted to find out whether they have anything to say or they remember anything, and we were told last week on the Sunday Times that they can't remember anything happening. They've been spoken to, and they can't remember this story that they were asked to sort of investigate Virginia. They say they have no recollection. Really? I mean, you don't forget something like that. It either happened or it didn't. And the other problem, and this is a very intriguing line that came out last week, is that the head of royalty protection, a man called Commander Peter Loughborough, who ran royalty protection at Scotland Yard, big friend of the royals, he's now working for the King. So it's excruciating for Scotland Yard, this, because their people were in the room or in the room next door when it may have happened.
There will be questions for so many people to answer. Always very welcome to come and give your side of the story if you've been mentioned during that discussion there. But Ben Taylor, thank you. Nigel Cawthorne, thank you as well.